All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Up All Night Book Club podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan.
I'm Abby, and today we're joined by our guest, Allie.
My name's Allie Young. I am the president of the UpAllKnight Book Club. I am studying finance at UCF, and I really like talking about books. I'm super excited.
Glad to have you here. So today's episode is about Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. It's a sci-fi thriller novel, and I'm going to go to spoilers, but here's a synopsis. A brilliant physicist named Jason Desson is living in Chicago with his wife Daniela and son Charlie. He's a true genius, and while there was a point in his late 20s when his research could have made him a star in his field, he instead chose a family-focused life. One night, while walking home, he's abducted by a mysterious masked man and injected with a drug. When he next awakes, his world has completely changed. He's no longer married, doesn't have a son, and has achieved professional success beyond his wildest dreams. This sets him on a thrilling, mysterious, and at times terrifying journey to learn what has happened to him and to find his way home to the people and the life he loves. So let's get started with our rating. We would love to hear from you listeners, what you guys thought. So send us a message, leave us a comment, and subscribe while you're at it. But let's hop into it.
I ended up rating this one a 5 out of 5. I really enjoyed it. It was super fast paced. I was obsessed with the story from chapter 2 and on. I just really enjoyed it, and I loved the conversations, the topic of it all. I just had a really fun time with it.
What about you, Abby?
Yeah, I'm on the fence between a 4 out of 5 or a 5 out of 5. Like Ali said, it was super fast paced, and really entertaining, which I loved. It just doesn't have a world that is stuck with me, which is why I'm hesitant to give it 5. But that does not mean it was not a fantastic book. I read it in one sitting, didn't mean to, but I did. And it just was so much fun. Or it had deep meanings, but it was just a fun book. And it got me out of a slump a bit, I feel like. So I love this.
Yeah, I also rated it 5 out of 5. This was a fantastic book. I think this is the best book I've read all year. Pretty close to the Midnight Library. Those two are top 2. I think this one edges out just a little bit ahead. I absolutely loved how he handled the really complex subjects like the quantum mechanics. It was just put in there very nicely. A very nice touch. I loved from page 1. All right. Favorite quote.
Yeah, so my favorite quote from the story is, it's terrifying when you consider that every thought we have, every choice we could possibly make branches off into a new world. And I just felt like that quote is just basically what this whole book is about. And it really makes you think about all your choices and how you make decisions for a reason, and it all kind of branches off into different things. And I just thought it symbolizes this book perfectly, kind of sums it all up.
Yeah, there was a couple quotes that really stood out to me, and it was really hard to narrow it down to one. A lot of them were at the end of the book where it got really deep with Jason. I guess it's technically Jason 9 versus Jason 2, even though the reader questions in the back continue calling him Jason 1. When he's logged into the portal, it says Jason 9, so I'll just call him Jason 9. This is when they're going back and forth. This is Jason 2 saying, "Every moment, every breath contains a choice. But life is imperfect. We make the wrong choices. So we end up living in a state of perpetual regret. And is there anything worse?" I don't know. That just resonated with me for some reason.
No, those are all really good quotes. I think something that this book deals with really well is this idea of choices and how they affect our future. Lots of times in book when they deal with time travel and interdimensional travel and stuff like that, there's a big emphasis on the butterfly effect. And this book kind of follows that. And I don't know, it leaves for some really good internal questions about how our choices impact our futures. I don't know. it was really interesting to read about. And my quote kind of deals with that. It's near the end of the book when Daniela is speaking to Jason too. And he's going on and he's kind of questioning himself whether or not he deserves to be the one that gets to stay with Danielle and Charlie. And she says to him, "It's the simple fact that you walked into my life at the exact moment you did, you instead of someone else. In some ways, isn't that even more incredible than the connection itself, that we found each other at all?" And it's basically her just saying, yes, maybe these are all the same Jason, the Jason that I first fell in love with, but the simple fact that you were the one that made all these choices that made you the first to get back to us means that you're my Jason. And I thought that was both like a really sweet sentiment and a really great way for the author to kind of explain to the reader why this Jason had the moral high ground, when it's kind of terrible when you realize like all these other men, all these, like the same dude, these same Jasons all went through similar terrible and horrific experiences and are going to lose for no reason other than chance, which is really sad. But I thought this was both a really sweet moment between the two of them and a great way to kind of explain that.
Yeah, that was a good one. So I think we're going to hop back into the questions at the end of the book. I really like the questions there. So we'll just go down the list there. We're going to start with the first one. So for you, what was the biggest surprise as you followed Jason through the many twists that laid out in Dark Matter? I guess I'll start. Even though I kind of saw it coming, the biggest twist for me was knowing that each time he exited the multiverse, another Jason like popped out, which makes sense when you think of like the quantum mechanics behind it. But just seeing it there in writing, like I watch a lot of sci-fi with like these types of concepts, and that's really never talked about, but it makes so much sense. And it's just so crazy to actually see it happen.
Yeah, to kind of bounce off that, I think the biggest twist for me was just how far the author was willing to go when it came to like this theory and stuff. Lots of times when it comes to sci-fi, there'll be like these little plot holes when it comes to like quantum mechanics, like with the fact at the end, I think there were like 109 Jasons in the group chat or something insane. Like, I don't think most authors would go there. They just kind of would have left that untouched a bit in order to make things simple enough for the reader to understand and like wrap their head around. But just how far this author was willing to go with like the science behind it all, and how clearly he was able to make it. Like even my little tiny tired brain could understand the quantum mechanic kind of bit, or at least I think I understand it a bit, just with the way he explained it and the way he wrote it all out. And so I don't know if that's technically like a plot twist, but that was something I definitely didn't expect and something I really enjoyed.
Yeah, in the back of the book, he actually says he consulted Dr. Clifford Johnson at the University of, I think it says South Carolina, for like all the physics stuff. So
very cool.
He really did his research for this one, talking to a professor and reading like a bunch of like good physics books.
Nice. So I can basically say I've read a physics book when I say I've read this.
Indirectly,
that's what I'm hearing.
Pretty much, yeah.
For me, I would say I have two specific scenes, I guess, in mind. The first one you guys kind of mentioned was the group chat. Again, I didn't really put it all into perspective until all these other Jasons start talking. And that kind of surprised me enough where I had to put the book down and really kind of think about how this was going to affect the story going forward. So I really enjoyed that scene. That's probably one of my favorite scenes from the whole book. And then the other one was whenever it kind of clicked for Jason and Amanda that when they were going into the different doors and like going into new worlds, the main thing that was kind of pushing them into that world was what they were thinking and hoping that world would be, or something that it all depended on what they were thinking about. And they were always being negative. And that's why those worlds were so bad, is because of how they were thinking about them and their mindset. And I didn't pick up on that until they like said it. And that was a pretty big twist, because then that just changed all the worlds that they were going into, going forward. So yeah, I liked those two parts.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely didn't see that one coming either. The like emotional state of the main characters is like what sent them where they went.
I really loved that. Especially as he kind of like the author made it a bit more complicated, because as soon as Jason was the one who figured that out, he immediately was like, okay, we need to write on paper, because when you write on paper, that's like the one thing you're most focused on. But as he gets a little longer, it just kind of like the author explains how Jason realizes that that's not really how the brain works. Even when you're like focused completely on writing that, like your little negative thoughts will still peep in if you're not completely confident. And that's something that Amanda was trying to get through to him that he wasn't understanding, but something he just had to realize for himself, which I don't know, was a great way to really speed up character development, I feel like, because considering this book is like only a little over 300 pages, a lot happens and a lot of growth happens for Jason as like a character. And again, I just thought that was so clever, that use like that to like show how much he's emotionally grown. Even though it was like, I think it was only like not even 100 pages. He was in like I forget the name of the box. In my brain, I was just like, oh, this is the TARDIS. This is what this is. So that's what I called it in my head.
I think they just call it the box.
The box. TARDIS is
the
cool.
book. Yeah. I mean, it is pretty much a TARDIS.
Yeah.
So.
It's bigger on the inside.
Yeah. So you already kind of answered this question, Abby, but the next question is, what makes Jason 1 a standout among the others? Is our allegiance to him a matter of perspective, or is there something fundamental to him that is more deserving of Daniela and Charlie than the others?
I think what Abby said earlier kind of definitely answered that. I think his viewpoint on getting back to Daniela was obviously, I think, rooted a little differently than all the other ones. But one of the things kind of on that as well, the whole story, I was like, when we realized that he was going to try to go back home, is I was like, how is Daniela going to find out who her Jason is? And that was my main thing. So trying to understand what he can do differently to show that he is who he is and doing all those things, I think was very interesting. And I definitely think he showed that towards the end, especially whenever he brought up a certain event that happened that only he knew because it was prior to the box. And I'm not really familiar on the exact event that happened, but he had the knowledge on that event to kind of prove he was who he said he was. But yeah.
Yeah, I was really wondering how the author was going to do that Jason versus Jason confrontation. And that plot twist of having like 100 Jasons definitely put a wrench in that.
I was waiting, you know that Spider-Man meme where there are two Spider-Men pointing at each other? I was waiting for that to happen in the book with the Jasons. I was like waiting for it, but yeah. I'm glad the author didn't do that. He was really, I think something that he did really well in this book was it was so clever. As someone who reads a lot of the times with thrillers and stuff, like you kind of learn to pick up on things and you kind of learn to like guess. But with this book, like I was waiting for the encounter between the two Jasons where they're like, oh no, I'm the real one. Wait, no, I'm the real one. Kind of like the Spider-Man beam thing. But he never did that. He had all these different, really rather creative ways, like with the group chat that none of us expected. I don't know. And I think that's why it was such an entertaining read, at least for me. Because every single time I predicted something, I was wrong, which, I mean, I don't want to say like I'm smart or anything. It's just because it's just one of those things when you read a lot, you learn to like pick up on what's going to happen next. And it was really good not to be able to do that with this book.
Yeah, but I guess to rein it back to the question, for me to answer the question, I think he kept the moral high ground. And I think that's what kept him there. He didn't like want to go kill the other Jasons.
Like, here's the question.
Okay.
What about the other Jasons that were waiting? Because remember, he sent the message in the group chat and was like, okay, we're all going to meet at the box and we're going to do a lottery and whoever wins the lottery gets to go. And yeah, like a bunch of Jasons tried to come kill him, but then a bunch were also waiting at the box, waiting to fairly do the lottery. And like, that was probably, even though in the book, we'd seen some pretty terrible stuff. I mean, he basically had to like kill his own wife at one point, I think, with like with the virus. Oh, yeah. He had to like give her the like stuff to kill her, which is devastating and really sad. The most like terrible, sad scene in the book for me was when he was walking to the box with Charlie and Daniela. And he had all these other Jasons, all of which had suffered similar, if not worse, things to him. And they were realizing they had lost, and they were stuck in a world where they did not exist, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like, think about, none of them, like maybe their social security cards or whatever were different in their world. They don't have one of those. They don't have driver's license. They don't have money. They have no life, no future, no family. And he's just abandoning them. Is that not terrible? Does that not make him a bad person for abandoning all these other essentially people?
I mean, I just think that there's no winning in that situation. Someone has got to, Daniela and Charlie have to walk away with one of the Jasons. So there's going to be a ton of Jasons that are really upset. So, I mean, there's that situation and that dilemma there. So you're bound to upset all of them.
Yeah. And that's going to take me a while to ponder on that question. I'm going to need to think about that one a lot more past this episode. But anyway, question 3, when the novel switches to Daniela's POV for the first time, were you surprised by the scene that takes place? Confused? What did you think was happening? So I guess a little refresher for the scene. That scene is I think it's chapter 3, where they're getting ready for work in the morning. And she notices there's some differences with Jason. She doesn't yet know that it's Jason too, but she knows something's off. So I knew that scene was coming. I knew that eventually the author was going to do that. So I wasn't really confused. I don't remember feeling really surprised, just kind of I was expecting it to happen.
I'm kind of the same way. I wasn't confused or anything. I think I was more interested to see if Daniela was going to pick up on anything. But it's kind of hard because you can't really expect that your husband's going to be a different version of your husband, But I was kind of interested to see if she would pick up more of the little quirks that are different in their morning routine, which she did. So yeah, it was fun. Interesting.
I definitely wasn't expecting the perspective switch. It was a little confusing at first. I think I had to read it again. But I did really like it. And it made a lot of sense. And I thought it was really endearing that she did notice all these different things about him. I see in the next question, we're going to talk about how at the heart, this book is a love story. And I thought that was a really great way the author developed their relationship, because we don't really get to see it in the book. I mean, they talk about it a lot, but a way he really shows it is that Daniela picks up on all these small things, just the way, the order of his bathroom routine and the way he brushes his teeth. And she notices and picks up on all these little details that he does differently. And I thought it was really sweet.
Yeah, I mean, that's a perfect segue into the next question, which is, at its heart, Dark Matter is a love story, yet we see Daniela in many different worlds and in situations where she is not with Jason and happy. Do you think they are supposed to be together? Do you believe that they would have been just as happy pursuing their career-driven dreams? Man, this goes back to a question that's come through multiple podcast episodes. It almost feels like the question is, are they soulmates? Which, after reading this story, I would say, yeah, I think they are, just because of their interactions with each other through all the different lives. It just seems like their souls are, to use quantum mechanics terms, intertwined. But then on the flip side, you can be happy with somebody that's not your soulmate, which we've talked about in previous episodes. So, and I love the way he did the love story. I just think that it was so perfect. I couldn't see it done any other way.
I don't actually think so. I think it's just, like Daniela said, it was this specific Jason and this specific Daniela. They were in love with each other and they were willing to do whatever it takes to be together. And that's just what love is. But I don't think necessarily they were soulmates. I mean, Daniela didn't love the other Jasons, if that makes sense. And like the author said, there were some situations where Daniela and him weren't very happy together because they sacrificed so much for each other. And I think it's just about the choices you make and the person you are. prioritizing the other. I don't know if I'm making any sense. But like, it's the fact that they just prioritize each other, and that these specific versions of Jason and Daniela loved each other. But I don't think that makes them soulmates. I think it's just personal decisions that these people had made, if that makes any sense. I don't know. It's like you said, Jonathan, I think in the past episodes, we've discussed a lot about this idea of soulmates, and I don't really like believe in it too much. So I guess that's why I have a hard time agreeing with it. But I do agree that these two people really do love each other, and it is really sweet to see.
I definitely agree with what you're saying, Abby. I don't think they're soulmates. I think that the only reason why this book portrayed such a strong connection between the two of them is because of how much sacrifice Jason 1 and Danielle have done in their life as we know it. The author kind of alluded that Jason put his career on pause to have their child together, and it was like an accident pregnancy, and they decided to keep it. And he put his career on pause, and he kind of just went into this different route. And so did Danielle. They both stopped their careers for the kid. So I think growing your life with someone surrounded by that kind of sacrifice, and now you're happy in a content relationship, I think that that's a different kind of love. And I don't think all the other Jasons would have done that. Clearly they didn't. So I think in that relationship, they were in love and whatever. But I don't think they are soulmates, if that makes any sense.
Oh yeah, I definitely see you guys' perspective. I think I guess I have more reflection to do on this part of the story. All right, so let's go on to the next question. So many of the decisions in Dark Matter center around the notion of career and family. If you had to choose, would you rather live Jason 1 or Jason 2's life? So Jason 1 is the Jason would get the perspective of. Jason 2 is the guy who replaces him. So if I had to choose, I would go with Jason 1. Even though he wasn't super successful in his career, he can get by, still getting, enough money to live pretty well off in Chicago. But he's got a good family, and I think family is really important.
Yeah, I was going to say the author kept trying to play off Jason 1 as a little bit poor, but I was like, sir, you own a brownstone in Chicago? You've got money.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I guess poor compared to some of his colleagues.
Yeah.
I would definitely choose Jason 1. I think the author we went into the perspective of Jason 2 and how his life was, and it wasn't what Jason 1 would be happy in. I mean, he didn't have a family. He lived alone. He was so immersed in his career. He had nothing else happening. So it definitely wasn't what I consider a happy life. I definitely feel like Jason 1 in his life is far more interesting, and I like that a lot more. But I think it was cool to see Jason 1 step into the other lives and kind of get this vision of what if my life went this way? What if I didn't have a child? Or what if I did pursue a career? And he realized that he wouldn't have been happy. And I think that's one of the main the major storylines and the thoughts that this author kind of addresses in this book that I really, really enjoyed. Just kind of like the what if. And then he realizes he doesn't really like it.
Yeah, I mean, that's why Jason 2 steps into Jason 1's life, because he's really not happy with the life he built, and he kind of realizes where he went wrong. And there's an essay in the back of the paper cover book where the author's talking about how he's thinking about regrets when he's writing this book. His books start off pretty personal. So he's thinking about those regrets and the what if I'd made this decision instead of the other. It's kind of a starting off point for the book.
Personally, I don't know if I'd like either. Okay, listen, I'm going to sound really heartless right now. I don't know if I want kids right now. If I had to step into either one of those lives right now, I couldn't handle a child. I don't know if that's something I'd want. And as someone who, my career is something I want to prioritize in my future. I don't know if I'd want to put it all on hold for family. I know I'm 19. That may change. Who knows? But I also don't think Jason 2 had a good life either. Like you said, he lived alone. He had no friends, no family. Is it Allison or Amanda, the therapist?
Amanda.
Okay. Even Amanda was like, he did nothing but work for years and years. I don't think that's healthy or something I'd want to do. So I think like a balance between them, which I guess is what we all really strive for. The mythic work-life balance. But something I want to touch on a bit what you said, Jonathan, about how the essay at the beginning of the book revealed that this was all started about like the regrets the author had had in his past. And in that way, even like the corridor of doors and everything, like it's giving me really big Midnight Library vibes from that.
Yes, that's what I was going to say later. Yeah.
I really like it. It's really interesting because the Midnight Library took a much more emotion. I want to know, like, what do you guys think? Who took the more emotional route, Midnight Library or Dark Matter? Because while Dark Matter is more like thriller sci-fi based, I don't know if it's necessarily less emotional than the Midnight Library. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I thought Dark Matter, like all the way. Because I mean, his emotions chose where he went. That and like it's a man trying to get back to his family, which that's just very emotional. That's a very strong like paternal drive. Whereas like the Midnight Library, well, yes, it was very emotional. It was more on like a psychological level.
No, I completely agree with you. And personally, I didn't really care for the Midnight Library. And as these kind of have very similar topics and just themes, I really enjoyed how Dark Matter did it. I really enjoyed it a lot more than the Midnight Library. I just think it was done really well. The emotional aspect to it, I think it was amazing. I think this one really outdid it for me.
It felt a lot more natural than the Midnight Library. It felt like I believe that this could happen. Like if somebody told me, like I saw in the news or something.
I just felt like there was a lot of passion behind the story from like Jason's perspective. Again, like he was trying to get home. I just felt like there's more to like where the story was heading rather than the Midnight Library. I just felt this was on a really good path and it like kept it that way. I felt like the Midnight Library was kind of slow for me, but this one had a lot of like twists and it was just really captivating from start to finish.
Yeah.
I definitely agree with that. Like the Midnight Library was almost like a self-help book disguised as a surreal fantasy. Whereas this was just an entertaining read with a really great moral about like your past and regrets and love and family, or not moral, like themes. I don't know which I prefer though. It was interesting. I'm glad to see that you guys both prefer Dark Matter though, because it was fun. I liked it a lot.
So question number 7. Without Amanda, Jason 1 might not have survived. What do you think of her decision to leave him? And how do you feel about their relationship?
Okay, so I think she should have left him way sooner than she did. I felt that he was dragging her along and he was very selfish in his decisions. And he had no thought about her and her decisions and where this would lead to her life. And I thought she was a very fascinating character and I really wanted to learn more about her. And I really want to know where she ends up. I want to know what world she's in, all of that. But yeah, I definitely think Jason 1 was extremely selfish, especially in the quarantine virus scene where she was in a car and she was going to leave him. I was like, leave him, just go away. Just leave him, let him learn his lesson. But that really got me upset. But yeah.
I definitely agree with you. I felt like Amanda wasn't as well developed as I think she could have been. Understandable considering there's a lot that happens in this book. But I don't think I realized just how selfish he was during the contagion scene until you said it. In my mind, I'm like, of course, no, you've got to like stay, even though she wasn't really his wife. You've got to stay with your family when they're dying so they don't die alone. Like that took priority. But now that you say it, like Amanda had no idea what was going on. She was probably scared out of her mind. Oh no. I guess that goes back to what you said, Jonathan, about this Jason having the moral high ground. Did he really have it? He was obviously a pretty selfish person and dragged this poor girl literally across time and space.
That's fair. I didn't see that perspective. I I think that Amanda was somehow involved with Jason too. I think that's part of the reason why she got him out and stuck with him so long, because, she obviously had a thing for him. But then that time where he just like sat outside his home for like the whole day, she's like, that was her breaking point. She's like, I can't do this anymore. So I'm glad she left, but I was kind of hoping she would show up at the end.
This was a main theme in our in the actual book club discussion, and people were actually really happy that they weren't actually a thing, because that's kind of a common theme in books that aren't like a romance book. It's like, oh, of course, like the main guy and this girl are gonna have a romantic thing, but majority of the members really appreciated the fact that it didn't turn into anything romantic, and the goal of the book still stayed with Jason and his real family. And whenever the situation presented itself with Jason and Amanda, Jason did decline her and chose not to interfere and do all of that. And I think it was greatly appreciated to me, and I think the majority of the members. So what did you guys think about that?
I thought it spoke miles about his character and like who he is, that, he still kept up his, words are eluding me right now. You guys know what I'm trying to say.
Loyal, right? Very loyal.
Yes, he was still loyal throughout space and time. I think that just spoke miles to him and his character.
I was going to say, I feel like I'm with you, Jonathan, that Jason too, I guess, and Amanda were definitely doing something. Just from that like one scene where she's like, do you really not remember me? And then like, I was like, oh, poor girl.
Yeah.
And that explains why she like stuck out with him for so long. And I don't know, I'm interested to see, because a lot of this book deals with choices, which Jasons decided to like take the shot with Amanda. I wonder what those Jasons are doing, where he like gave up on his family and was just like, well, there's this nice girl right next to me. I guess I can have a new family. I wonder if that like ever happened. Do you guys think that's something any Jason character would have done? Or do you think most of them probably stayed true to Daniela?
Oh, if you're going with the quantum mechanics side of things, absolutely 50% of Jasons did. So there's an infinite amount of Jasons who stayed loyal, and there's an equally infinite amount who, faltered.
One question I'm really interested to hear your guys' thoughts on is question 10. Dark matter has a somewhat unusual combination of qualities. It's part thriller, part sci-fi, part love story. Any books or movies that this like kind of reminded you of? Or even if you liked the combination, did you think it was too much? Or did you really like that he kept like kind of genre flipping a lot?
I loved it. It was very Michael Crichton-esque, which he actually talks about Michael Crichton as like one of his inspirations in his essay. But another book that does it, I think, Sphere.
Hey, before you go on to the next book, can you explain to me who the Michael Crichton guy is? I'm sorry.
Oh yeah. Sorry, I forget that people. Yeah, no, Michael Crichton is the author behind Jurassic Park. So he writes like Jurassic Park and the sequel, The Lost World. He writes like Congo, Sphere, Timeline, Airframe, a bunch of. He's like the first not hard sci-fi, techno thriller. First techno thriller author, who's really combined like thriller and sci-fi, hard sci-fi, and you learn something reading his books, which is awesome. But that's who he reminded me of throughout the whole book. So I thought it was neat at the end to see that was his inspiration for his writing. It kind of reminded me of Sphere. I don't know if people have read Sphere. It does have thriller aspects. It takes place underwater, so it's also science fiction because there's like a spaceship on the bottom of the ocean. And there's a little bit of a love story, barely, but that's what it reminded me of. What about you guys?
Well, I did read Recursion by Blake Crouch, and there's a lot of similarities. So if you liked Dark Matter, I would definitely give that one a go. It's extremely similar. He definitely has a type of book and story he likes to go for. But I definitely think that dark matter is easier to understand when it comes to like talking about like the sci-fi and like the math or the quantum mechanics or whatever, it is. It can be kind of overwhelming, but I think that dark matter was very simplified and it's easy to understand. Recursion was a little bit more challenging, but I still loved it, but they're very similar.
Yeah, I need to read that book, Recursion. That's on my list.
I'm with all you guys. I love the genre flipping. It reminded me like vaguely of Knives Out, if either of y'all have seen that movie, and that it seems originally like it's going to be just like a whodunit. And then it becomes like a really like mystery thriller, and then reverts back to like a whodunit at the end. It's a lot of fun. Highly recommend. But a book this really reminded me of is called, I have it up here. There are like a ton of authors. The Rise and Fall of Dodo by Neil Stevenson and Nicole Gallant. It deals with like the same quantum mechanics of time travel and interdimensionary travel, except it deals with this question of what is like science, if not just like a super hard fantasy system, if that makes any sense. And it deals with like these ideas of like people who can time travel are what we perceive as witches. But they explain it all with like literally the same like cat analogy, same Schrodinger's cat analogy is used in this book. And it also has like those similar themes of like, it's kind of a love story, kind of a historical fiction, because it deals with more time travel than interdimension and like multiverse travel. And kind of just like a fun thriller. So if you liked this book, I definitely recommend The Rise and Fall of Dodo. It's like 800 pages, I think. So it's hefty, but it was a good read.
If anybody listening has any recommendations, please leave a comment, send us a message. I love this type of book. So please, I want to read more.
Okay, I want to get your guys' opinion on how you visualized the box. So how did you guys, when you were reading it, how did you visualize the box from whenever he's going out on his adventure and he has to go back to find a new world? Like, how did you see it in the story?
I think I explained earlier, I was like, this is the TARDIS. And so in my brain, I just imagined the police box. I don't think that's what the author was intending, but I have a really nasty habit of just completely ignoring character and product descriptions in books and just filling in with that whatever I want. But Jonathan, what do you have?
Yeah, that brings up a good question, like of does anybody else see the box? Because obviously like not every, timeline has the box and it's always in that same like physical space. So I think I'll answer the first question in a second. So I visualize the box as like a box inside of a box, kind of like I don't know if you guys have seen drawings of like a tesseract of like the like 4D. It's like the easiest way to be Google it, it would take me probably too long and too complicated and I'd explain it very poorly. So Google it and yeah. Anyway, so like it's a solid box on the inside and the outer box, I imagine kind of having bezels and kind of like a, what's the texture? Kind of like a carbon fiber texture on the outside. And it's like a dark, almost black gunmetal color, with this big industrial door on it. And then inside the box, obviously it's just a pitch black square. And then for some reason, whenever we went into the hallway, everything turned gray and there was like house doors. Like the door changed from the industrial door to house doors. I don't know why. I guess that's the easiest way for me to process it. But that's how I visualized the corridor. Now to go back and answer my other question on like why nobody else saw it, I think it's because they were entangled with the box, going to some quantum mechanics. And it's still like the original box from Jason 2's timeline that's just superimposed onto each individual timeline, because when Jason 1 went to that warehouse, he didn't see the box. He didn't see anything because he hadn't been entangled with it yet. He hadn't entered it. Jason 2 had to be there to put him in the box. So I think once they went back to Jason 2's timeline and he went in the box for the first time, some type of entanglement happened and he was able to find it again. So hopefully that makes sense. What did you think, Allie?
So I'm kind of like with Abby on this one where I don't really listen to the descriptions and all that. I kind of just let my mind do whatever it wants. So this will be fun. So I saw the box as kind of like an invisible box where you can kind of see where it is. If it's like under a tree or like in a mountain or whatever, it's invisible, right? And then only the person that's been entangled with the box can go into the box. And then this is where it gets kind of weird is it wasn't a dark corridor. It was bright white, and it was I don't know, but yeah, it had like home doors kind of all the way down, but it was like nothing but white. I have no idea why, but I think if it was black, it would make it more fun because they can't see each other. You can't see that guy, that one Jason that kind of walks through, but I saw him clearly. But I don't know, yeah, all white.
I will say I'm with you in that I pictured kind of the corridors being all white. But unlike you guys, I pictured like submarine doors, like metal bolted with like the door handles that you have to twist. I don't know why. I think that just goes back to like my whole like Doctor Who thing. I don't know if you've seen Doctor Who, Allie, or else you're very confused. It's very like, I don't want to say steampunk, but like 80s sci-fi.
Depends on the doctor too.
Yeah. I'm talking about the new Doctor Who in case anyone listening is like a diehard fan. I haven't seen the stuff from the 80s. I'm not that smart. But yeah, it's really interesting. I love that we all pictured it very kind of differently. And I guess, did the author even really describe it? Or are we just imagining, did we just like come up with this?
I think he described it when we like first found the box, like first went into the room. But honestly, I always throw descriptions out the window and just my mind fills in the blank. So
glad we're on the same page there.
So I was wondering what you guys think. What do you guys think of the science and technology in the book? Do you think that type of advancement is possible? And would you want it to exist? Would you use it? Yeah, collective head shakes.
I loved the science aspect of it. I actually do really like reading about science. I just find it really hard sometimes to understand. And when it's in fiction like this, I can understand it, or at least I trick myself into thinking I do. And it made it really fun. It made me feel clever when I was reading it. It made me feel smart. Like I wasn't just reading a random book. I was actually learning something and using my brain. I don't think technology like this can or should ever exist, though. I think we saw in the end with the over 100 Jasons in one world, all of them like 90% of them devastated by the end because they had lost the love of their life. I don't think anyone wants that. What about you guys?
I completely agree. I think this would be a very bad decision if this was available to anyone. I think it would only lead to terrible things happening. And I really can't wrap my head around actually visiting other worlds that you're in. Like I just can't think of it that way. In real life, it's really fun to, dream about it in a book and stuff, but really thinking about it realistically, I just can't. It's too big for me to really, think about it actually happening.
Yeah, I think that if this technology and science is actually possible, which I think we don't know enough about quantum mechanics to know if it is or not, I think it would be inevitable to come around. I think it would be devastating like it is in this book. The only issue I have, and I would not use it. Absolutely not. Stay away. Because of all the hurt, pain, and suffering, and also the plot hole in the book. The paradoxes. You always see in sci-fi when you meet yourself, creates a paradox. Like, I don't know, that was just the only plot hole that wasn't even touched on. That kind of bugged me through the book.
So we all agree that this is immoral, awful technology. So I'm seeing it's not Michael Croft, Michael Crichton influence there with like the whole Jurassic Park thing. But that also means it's definitely going to exist one day, probably by like a Jeff Bezos kind of guy. what's the Jurassic Park quote? We were so focused to see if we could, we didn't think if we should, or something.
Yeah, that's pretty much the gist of it. Yeah. Yeah, no, they did it for the sake of the science. No.
What did you guys think about Jason and Daniela choosing that Charlie can pick the door and he can think, and his emotions are kind of connected to the new world that they're opening? What were your emotions during that? What were your thoughts and all that?
I love that. I thought that was great. That is a way to not have them be tracked. So it's practical. And they're really ripping their son out of the world he loves and knows. So that gives him the opportunity to at least jump into something he would be more comfortable with. So I think on the emotional aspect, it's genius as well.
I really liked it from an emotional standpoint, but from an intellectual standpoint, I think letting a 14-year-old boy pick where you're going to spend the rest of your life, probably not the smartest decision, but I do understand why the author did it, because it kind of goes back to this idea of like family and fatherhood, where he's like, no, I have no idea what's going to happen, but it's my responsibility as a parent to give my child that trust. And I thought that was a really clever way for the author to demonstrate that. But I also think, again, he's a 14-year-old boy. Probably will end up in Jurassic Park from the 14-year-old boys I've met.
I think that he turned 16 because he missed a birthday. Am I wrong in that?
Yeah. I'm sorry, but like their mental state changes that much between those few years.
Yeah, he saw his son as a man. I remember that line. He said, like, he's looking at his son and he said, he's a man. I was like, okay. Yeah. There's a lot of character development for Charlie in like the last 30 pages.
I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really well done. The way I kind of envisioned it was like, there's this boy and he kind of has an understanding of what's just happened. And all he wants is his parents to be happy and to live in a world where he has his friends again and his mom and dad are, we're all in a happy little family and everything's good. So in that perspective, hopefully they live a happy life and everything's kind of back to normal, because that's what Charlie would want. And knowing that, I kind of left it at that with a little thought, where is Amanda and what is she doing? But other than that.
All right, I think that's really interesting. Do we want to like talk about where we think Amanda is in our own heads? Like, if we love Amanda, we want her to have the best life, what are you guys imagining?
I think there's two roads that pop into my head for Amanda. She goes back to that futuristic world that, she could be happy in. I think she could have gone back there. Or I'm still like firm in her like involvement with Jason. So she found a timeline where her and Jason can be together. Those are my two worlds.
Yeah, I think it would be really cool if she was back working with Jason, but Jason was more like Jason 1, because Jason 1 was just a nicer guy and he had better morals and all that stuff. So because it seemed like she really enjoyed her job and what they were doing. So if she was able to do that while still being what the type of Jason she liked, then I think she'd be happy.
Yeah, kind of the same vein, except a place with definitely no snow. That's where my mind goes. She's probably sick and tired of snow. She never wants to see it again. I'm not going to lie. That was like, if the last scene of the book was the most sad for me, the most terrifying bit was when they're in that snowstorm, especially as like, I think we're all Floridians. Snow is such like an unknown concept. I'm like, what are they doing? What's going to happen? I'm terrified.
I hate the cold. I couldn't imagine. I wouldn't have survived that world.
Me neither. I hated that one, but I read through it so fast because it was so interesting to me. And I was like, we got to get back to the box. Let's go. All
right. That kind of leads into an interesting question. What was your guys' like favorite world or dimension they traveled to?
I like the futuristic world. That one was just so cool. See, like, it's at the same time as us, but it's just so much more advanced. like what changed in our timeline to go that way. I also want to answer what my least favorite world was too. 2 and 1. I hated the plague world. I don't know, just especially with everything going on, it just felt, I guess, a little bit too close. When I saw CDC, it triggered me. CDC guidelines, I was like, oh my gosh, no, please stop.
I'm the exact same as Jonathan. I hated the virus one. I wanted that world to end as soon as possible. It was too close to home. I just didn't like it at all. But I really liked the futuristic one. I thought it was fun. It wasn't too extreme. It wasn't sad. It wasn't, it was kind of a good medium for me.
I think my favorite was the plague world. Just because, really? I don't know, I guess I'm like the opposite. When you guys saw CDC, you were like, no, too close. I'm like, how are we interpreting this? Especially given that we've like lived through, like, not obviously as serious as a plague, one where like apparently your entire body decomposes and there's absolutely no cure. Let's hope that never happens. I thought it was just really interesting to see how they deal with it. Apparently in this imaginary world, people actually quarantine.
Crazy concept.
I know. And I just really liked reading about that bit. It was very sad though. Again, like from a writing standpoint, it was just really interesting to see how Jason dealt with that emotionally. I mean, literally seeing his wife die in front of him for the second time. And eventually having to essentially kill her in order to give her like, what's the word? Honorable death. I don't want to say honorable death. Death with dignity. That's the phrase. I thought that was just interesting to read about. And my least favorite world was the snow world because the entire time I was scared. And I don't like being scared.
Man, how many worlds do you think that Jason could have infected from that plague world? Because there are some realities that, he did get sick and then he traveled in the multiverse. How many timelines do you guys think he ruined?
I was just going to say that was like you talked about like the paradox timeline. I was like, he's not wearing a mask. He's touching this girl, airborne particles. I thought they were going to die. I thought the book was just going to end halfway through with them dying from the plague. So I guess that was my plot hole I spotted.
Yeah, that is another point. The author just like, all right, let's move on.
See, if I just keep thinking about that, then it doesn't become fun anymore. And it's just, I get too specific, in the details and I'm not having fun. I'm not enjoying this. So I just kind of like to leave it at that.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to something more fun then. What do you guys think of the title and the cover? Because we have to hit that every book.
Okay. I'm going to need you guys to explain the title for me. I still don't get it.
Do you have an explanation, Ellie?
I don't have an explanation, but he did say dark matter while describing. I think it might have been like how the quantum mechanics works and the process, because he was explaining it either to Daniela or someone, I don't remember, but he was explaining it and used dark matter. So I kind of think that that's where it's at with the book title. I'm fine with it. I mean, it doesn't really explain it as detailed as I think I would prefer. Do you guys have any other alternatives for a title?
I think this was perfect because it doesn't give away anything of the book. And from my understanding of dark matter, it's kind of like the opposite of our matter. So it's kind of like what kind of, I guess, creates the multiverse and allows it to exist. It's like the stuff between the multiverses is kind of how I understand it. But then again, I'm not a physicist, so I just casually read science nonfiction. So
yeah, I was going to say, I think I got dark matter a bit confused with antimatter, which kind of speaks for itself. It's matter that destroys matter. And so I was a little confused. But I just found a Wikipedia article, and it's like you said, it's matter that exists between the multiverse, I guess. If you want to talk about it in sci-fi terms. If I'm going to come up with an alternate title, maybe the box.
I was literally going to suggest that. And then I was like, is that too specific to the story and what we're dealing with? But I was like, does the box sound too plain or weird? But I think it's great.
I think I might put too much emphasis on the box, on the actual travel through the worlds and not Jason's journey. I'll leave some like info on dark matter in the show notes, like scientific dark matter. So if anybody's interested in reading on some stuff.
What did you guys think of the cover art? Because I have the Book of the Month edition and I'm obsessed with it. Yeah, I love it.
Mine's the same, but inverted. So I have red words with a dark background, which I like this one better. I think this one it caught my attention. No, I think it's really cool. It's like got 3 different dimensions of the title in there. So
I was going to say, I love the way that the title kind of like is stacked on top of each other, like the multiverses. I thought that was really clever and I liked it a lot, but it's not too complicated. Which I feel like a lot of sci-fi books have very like graphic covers a lot of the time. The same way with fantasy, where that like it screams you're either reading like a fantasy or a sci-fi novel. And this one really doesn't. It's just really simple and plain, but it still catches your eye. And it looks really pretty on my shelf. Oh, does your spine, like the spine has the stacking for me as well, which I love. I love that detail.
Mm-hmm. Mine does too. Yeah. I love minimalistic covers like this one, or like the Foundation series, that new reboot or the republish. That's really nice.
And it's not like it's not too simplistic either. Like I think, especially for literary fiction, I think the genre is, all the covers can sometimes look the same. They're so minimalistic. And this one doesn't fall on that. It's really nice.
It's creative. It ties into the book. And yeah.
All right. So our next episode, the first episode in this season 2 of the Up All Night Book Club podcast, is going to be Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo, which I'm so excited for. Leigh Bardugo is probably my favorite author of all time. And I'm really excited to see what everyone thinks.
Yeah, thanks for joining us for season 1 of the Up All Night Book Club podcast. I've had a great time reading with you guys. And yeah, I'm excited for week 2. Thanks for joining us. Oh, not week 2, season 2. Thanks for joining us, Allie. It's great to have you back on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a blast.
And we'll see you guys for season 2.